Regions of the Dayton, I'm Scaldrew and I'll be your host. Tonight's top story, why you shouldn't buy SR3. More on that later, but first, can flies breathe underwater? The answer is no. No, they cannot. As you could probably tell from the spoiler warning, I'm not the biggest fan of Saints Row the Third. This game is nothing like its predecessor. If you watched my previous Yield Hangman, you'd know I praised Saints Row 2 for the sense of freedom the game gave you. You could do virtually anything and everything you wanted without the game ever telling you to stop and go do something else. Saints Row 3, I refuse to call it the third, is nothing like that. If you remember playing Ocarina of Time, you'll also vividly remember hating Navi constantly bugging you with every single thing you either already knew or cared little about. Saints Row 3 does the exact same thing, only it never stops and you could never ignore it. The game is constantly trying to hold your hand, not only in missions, but in the open city as well. It'll every so often let you know about the many side activities in which you can take part, and the first few missions are all tutorial missions. Let's start at the beginning. You start off the game by robbing a bank, which is odd to me, seeing as you spent the entirety of the last game taking over a city, so you'd expect to be pretty wealthy beyond belief. Anyway, it turns out it's a trap! And you, Gat, and that thing they call Shawnee, are incarcerated by the police only to be visited by the people whom you were robbing. You are then taken to an aeroplane, I don't know, just go with it, where the head of a collective crime ring, known as the Syndicate, is trying to cut you a deal. Either you give him 66% of Stillwater's gross income, or you die. Oh, and did I mention he's Belgian? Because that's pretty important somehow. So important that they feel the need to tell you twice before killing him off 5 missions down the line. Obviously Gat does his badass thing, which allows you to make your way off the plane. He's then killed, but luckily you and Shawnee make it off the plane alive, and land in a new city called Steelport. The Syndicate then empty your bank account, so you're left with nothing but your gonads to start all the way from naught and work your way up to the top again. Unlike the previous game, in which you can choose to do whatever the hell you wanted, you're pretty much forced to start doing the missions immediately. There are no activities available to you, meaning there's no way to acquire money with which you customize your character or upgrade your weapons. Weapon customization is new in Saints Row 3. You can buy new weapons and upgrade them by paying extra cash. The more money you spend, the better the gun becomes. You also won't be able to customize motorized land vehicles due to the lack of means by which you can quickly or efficiently acquire currency. Right from the start, Saints Row 3 hampers you in terms of what you can choose to do. For instance, you can no longer choose to be a woman with a manly voice, beard and ellipsis. Now I would be okay with this if it weren't for the fact that the first, give or take, 20 missions are all tutorial missions. They show you how to buy clothes, they show you how to buy property, they even show you how to do activities. You cannot progress through the story until you've done all 14 activities at least once through the missions. Only after completing what I like to call activity missions do you unlock more of the same activity. Luckily, the unlocked activities aren't obligatory, but they're so monotonous and uninspired. They've done away with all the fun activities from the previous game. I won't argue that all of the activities in Saints Row 2 were fun, but the fact that you reserved the right to choose whether or not you wanted to partake in them meant you never had to find out how absolutely boring some activities were. In Saints Row 3, you're forced to do every single one of them at least once, which really exposes how lackluster some of them are, as a few are just copies from the others but with a different coat of paint sprayed over them. The activities no longer have 6 levels of scaling difficulty. The third and final stages of each activity no longer yield a permanent reward or upgrade. Instead, your newly improved phone now has a tab called Upgrades, in which you can find all of the available upgrades you can purchase. Your respec level maxes out at 50 as the game gradually makes its upgrades available to you each level. Because of the lack of money for the first few hours of the game, you'll find yourself contemplating whether or not you should buy an upgrade for more health or upgrade your weapons instead, as the enemies are all bullet sponges. Saints Row 3 no longer allows you to choose what you want to do. There's the efficient way of doing things, which means doing the missions, doing all the activities, buying all the property, and buying all the upgrades. And then there's the non-efficient way of doing things, which means choosing to ignore doing the boring activities, not spending hours driving around buying all the property, and because you won't have any money to spend, not buying all the upgrades. If Saints Row 2 were truly a sandbox, Saints Row 3 is a playground with queues and moderators and your mum holding your hand making sure you don't fall off the slide, or that you've done everything at least once before you can go home and eat ice cream. It also doesn't help that the playground is sticky, too small, in need of repairs, and there's some creepy guys in a black windowless van, always watching with binoculars and claiming they've got sweets in the back. Saints Row 3 really feels like it's trying to appeal to a younger demographic, with the forced popular music and some missions deafening and huge explosions and blood that takes up most of the screen. It's nice to look at and somewhat fun to play, but upon further inspection you find yourself being guided through a linear corridor with brightly blinking lights and toilet humor. They've replaced the ridiculous over-the-top 80s action movie hero badass protagonist with giant purple dildos and autotune.
This is a rescue, right? This ain't some elaborate setup for a gangbang.
The game lacks content, it lacks seeing Carlos or Aisha die, it lacks avenging your fallen comrades, it lacks good characters and good narrative. As I've mentioned before, Shawnee is now a completely different person. She's not the fun-loving, weed-smoking, sex-having 20-something-year-old, but instead is now a constantly angry and annoying person, wearing skin-tight latex trousers of all things. The game definitely comes across as offensive multiple times. Pierce actually makes 2 sexist remarks on 2 different occasions for no real reason. One of the later characters, Kinsey, actually talks down to you a couple of times, implying that you're too dumb to understand certain technical things. And when you meet the mayor of Stillport, you're actually portrayed as a mindless fanboy. If you've played and enjoyed Saints Row 2, you'll feel so incredibly detached from the characters. Everyone from the previous game has changed so radically, making them impossible to recognize, remember, or care for at all. Nothing from the previous game is in this one. You feel alienated. Once you beat it, you actually want to cry. How could they have destroyed such a beautiful and glorious legacy? Has Volition truly peaked, or was this all just a ruse from the beginning? They wanted to build an empire under someone else's rule, and then when the work was completed, they ambushed the Emperor and stabbed him in the back repeatedly. F2 Volition, F2 THQ. Sorry, I got carried away. I truly believe Saints Row 3 to be a travesty to the Saints Row franchise. It's disgusting, insulting, ugly, vile, tainted, wrong, abhorrent, loathsome. Negative adjective number 9. As an experience. As a game, it's average at best. If you're new to the Saints Row franchise, maybe you'll get some giggles or some fun out of this game. And hey, from a technical point of view, it's certainly an improvement over Saints Row 2. The controls don't bug out, the performance isn't a big issue, it introduces some new features such as being able to walk while throwing grenades and lunging, and playing online with friends isn't a hassle anymore either. If you're at all interested in buying it, I'd suggest doing so with a friend. You can do the story in co-op mode, which makes it somewhat more tolerable. You can expect a measly 10 hours of playtime compared to the mammoth 50 or more hours you'll be spending in Saints Row 2. So in summary, Saints Row 3 is the amalgamation of the sticky, tiny playground in need of repairs, and negative adjective number 9. I'd urge you to just pick up Saints Row 2 instead. The PC version is riddled with bugs and performance issues, but I hear the developers are planning on releasing a toolkit that'll allow for easy modding, which means we may be looking at unofficial patches in the future. Saints Row 2 isn't as shiny and new as Saints Row 3, but it'll keep you interested throughout, and satisfied after putting it down. If you're wondering whether or not the DLC for Saints Row 3 is worth it, the short answer is no. A lot of it are just costumes and vehicles. Only 3 pieces of DLC contain a handful of missions, but then no improvement over the game's missions. One of these 3, called Genki World 7, is just more activity missions, and the other 2 make no sense story-wise and are just as grindy as boring as the rest of the missions. Save yourself some money and don't buy any DLC for this game. Thanks for watching my video about Saints Row 3. Consider liking if you really liked the video, commenting if you want to make me aware of how painfully mistaken I am, and subscribing if you'd like to see more of this type of video. If you'd like to see my previous Yield Hangman, you can do so by clicking the annotation on the screen, which will take you right to it. I also have a Facebook page. Liking it would make me feel less insecure, so why not check it out? The link is in the description below this video. That'll be all for now. Take care.